Okay, so I'm excited today to be joined by Chris Robinson, who is the Chief Information Officer at Manchester Metropolitan University. Now, Chris leads IT for one of the UK's largest universities. They have about 45,000 students and staff across multiple campuses. And one of the things I find really compelling about Chris's role is he's at the intersection of two massive pressures. There's the immediate need to keep systems up and running, especially during critical periods like enrollment and exams, where even a brief outage can disrupt thousands of students. And there's this long-term challenge of modernizing an infrastructure that's been around for some time. So, like every organization today, Manchester Metropolitan is navigating users who expect Netflix-like digital experiences. These are students after all. And at the same time, you've got legacy systems that weren't built for that reality. And there's this constant balancing between innovation and keeping the lights on and performing today's mission. In higher education, the stakes are even higher because you're serving not just customers, but you're shaping the next generation. And that's really important. So I'm looking forward to exploring how Chris, separates genuine business needs from things that are nice to have, and how he builds resilient teams that can perform under pressure, and also how he decides, what gets a yes and what gets a no when every department thinks that their request and their approach is mission critical. So, Chris, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So let's start. You've led IT and technical teams before education in a number of financial services businesses before your current role at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm interested in what makes the CIO role at a university where decision making can be a bit more distributed. What makes it different from an environment where things are a little bit more centralized?
I sit on the exec team in the university, and I did in my previous life in financial services. In financial services, there were seven of us around the table. In the university, it's a much more complex mix. So you'll see 17 or 18 people sat around the exec table, and they're representing a very disparate number of things, whether that be research, education, the faculties, professional services teams, the traditional things around people, finance, technology. So that stakeholder mix makes things very, very complex. I think there are similarities between my life in corporate side and in university, in that the mix of what I would call one university requirements, the key strategic intent versus the more local requirements is a challenge, right? So I think you mentioned it at the outset. Our starting point was difficult. So you've got a huge amount of legacy to contend with. These competing needs from a very disparate mix of stakeholders. The need to drive a transformation and to handle these kind of competing requests. And at any one time, we can have up to 100 things in the backlog, as well as maybe 17 projects running. I think the balanced portfolio point is key, right? So, we try very hard to make sure that in our project hopper at any one time, we have a mix of projects that will span transformational intent, things that are needed to improve certain parts of the university, and equally kind of keeping up with that transformation of the legacy. But we have to constantly remind people what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the priorities actually are. I don't think you can ever do enough of that in university land. The kind of what is the core mission? Why are we doing it? And the kind of what will come next. But it's complex, and that broad set of demands isn't going to go away. And I think as a CIO generally, you're not going to be able to please everybody all of the time, and that's definitely true in university land.
Maybe you can describe a little bit of the process. So you've got 17 different stakeholders, presumably they're from different parts of the university representing different disciplines or schools. And they all have different needs. But can you talk a little bit about how you hear what they have to say and ultimately decide what you're going to do and then, you know, communicate that out to them and to their teams?
Yeah, I think again in corporate land, it was a little more straightforward. We would have had business strategy, which would be refreshed every few years, and then obviously the IT strategy comes in behind that. So you'd work out what you needed to do to help fulfill the business strategy, how what the funding profile would look like. I think in universities there are multiple strategies. So there'll be a research strategy, an internationalization strategy, education strategy. We have strategy around sustainability. We've got a campus strategy, the kind of building strategy. So we went through something called the Road to 2030 for the university, where all those strategies were put together. And as that was being done, it was a question of making sure that there was lots of engagement with the key leaders of each of those kind of theme areas and picking out the key things for IT, and that we had an aligned IT strategy. I think we're at the 3-year mark now for some of that. So we're logically kind of approaching a point when it's going to make sense to refresh it. And again, I think our next offsite as an exec actually will be focusing on those key strategies around international students and research. So I'll be then picking out the key things, working out what's changed. I think equally you've got to have that one eye on the external market. I think AI has bubbled up quickly. It's difficult to talk about IT and not talk about AI. And so when I'm looking at our strategic intent and the things we wrote down 3 years ago, I mean, it was referenced, but it wouldn't have been a core component part of our strategy. So that's going to have to be picked up at pace. I think mechanically we have something called a systems strategy and prioritization board. So we take things through there actually, which has got that broad range of stakeholders on there, to kind of opine and prioritize the kind of keywords that we do. But we've had that benefit of following the roadmap that we set out when we did the strategy. As I say, I think now is the time to reflect on whether what we've got ahead is right.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your team. I work with our team internally at Freshworks all the time, and one of the things that we always talk about is how do we avoid burnout? How do we keep people excited about what they're focused on, keep them focused on kind of the long-term impact, even though sometimes everything can seem really urgent. Can you talk
Yeah.
about the kind of people that you look for and how do you keep that team motivated and excited about and connected really with the mission of the university?
The demands are extreme. When I arrived in the institution, it was very clear that we were going to have to embark on fairly significant transformation. And I think the history of the university had not been that, right? So we needed to reflect at that point and recognize we needed some different skills and some different people, both with that transformational outlook, but kind of picking on resilience as well as picking on talent and capability. So I think we've built a more resilient organization. I think when you're in transformation mode, it's just really tough. We've had a few multi-year programs that have drawn on a lot of resource and fatigue sets in. It's just inevitable. I think if you then kind of look externally, I mean, the cyber landscape has changed immensely. I mean, it's incredibly lively to say the least. So we have people who have to manage those key university set pieces. Then they'll be on a major program. They'll be, and in some teams they'll be supporting multiple programs where we've got hotspots across the team. And then they'll have to jump on the latest kind of cyber attack or major incident that we're dealing with, right? So it's really tough. The point around mission is key, isn't it? So the kind of keeping an eye on the strategy, making sure that we're constantly trying to reinforce what we're trying to achieve and why the hard yards are worth it and where it's going to get us to. I think, as you say, with the university context and lots of legacy, and that's where we've come from. There was a period where major incidents were a fairly standard order of the day, right? I think we've touch wood, we've largely got through that period, so we can demonstrate the success of the things that we've done by the stability of the environment, the outcomes that we're now delivering. And I think we've reached the phase of the strategy now where it's really tangible benefit for the university. So we can keep reminding ourselves how this is impacting students, impacting researchers. We did some work on a cloud platform for research, which has been shortlisted for Cloud Projects of the Year at the Cloud Awards in the UK, right? So, and those things are important. It's not necessarily around winning an award, but the kind of recognition and reinforcement of just how fantastic some of the things are that we're doing. Equally, on that particular project, it enabled researchers in some fantastic areas. Actually, one was around Parkinson's research to really speed up the cycle times around their research, and equally to then capture some significantly larger grants, which again enables us to further that research, right? So celebrating those successes, both from an IT standpoint, but more importantly, what it enables for our researchers, our staff, and our students is really key. I think you can. I always feel like I should be doing more of it. I always feel like I'm never quite doing enough. But when the opportunity comes, shouting about strategy and shouting about outcome is where the game is, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I find with our team, they really respond when they can see what they've done. And like you said, these projects can take, multiple quarters, a year, but when they see the impact, that's when the pride really comes out. And it just gives them an extra boost to focus on the next thing and keep delivering for the organization, which is awesome. Now, but at the same time, you've got like a really unique set of demands in that every year you've got a new set of students coming in, and they're accustomed to TikTok and WhatsApp and very consumer grade experiences. You can't make every experience consumer grade, but how do you think about, okay, where are the moments where you're going to lean in and invest in that kind of an experience for the students?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That I think, and I've had a few surprises maybe along that particular journey about learning what student expectations actually are. Right, I think one of the things is they tend to come to university from schools and colleges, right? So whilst their kind of day-to-day experiences with technology are quite high, they aren't necessarily like that in the schools and the background that they come from, right? So they can be a little more forgiving, perhaps, than you might expect. But I think that is definitely changing, and there are some things that we've really got to focus on. I think there are two core missions really for students. One, making sure that their educational experience is really well supported, right? So the environments that we build support assessments and support their submissions and all those kind of things have to be really, really seamless. They have to work, right? Because there's a lot of stress in that particular area.
Huge.
But yeah,
Huge.
they won't be very forgiving
Mm-mm.
if those kind of platforms don't work for them. I think the other aspect is, and I think we've got more to do in this area really, but the other one is around student services and their broader experience, right? And I think we, like a lot of institutions, have become over time quite fragmented. We haven't considered that student experience. What we've tended to do is think, right, well, we have a new problem, let's find a new solution. And what that means for students is fragmentation, right? So they have to access a lot of systems during the course of a week. So our next, the big one for next year really will be harmonizing that journey and the tools that underpin it from the point of, a student becoming aware of the university, and we start to communicate with them and then with us through to the point where we enroll them, and they start to come on board to the university. We need to streamline that. We're still at the point, I think, where we have too many tools, we can make that far simpler. And I think the other thing, obviously I'm talking to the CEO of Freshworks, but the service automation component is going to be really key. I mean, that's obviously for staff as well, but making sure that there is choice for the things that they can choose to access in an automated way, in a relatively seamless way, and that's facilitated by agents fundamentally, and making sure that we kind of ensure that the personal touch remains for those things where they would expect it, because not everything is going to be IT and student land. There's still that student facing aspect. So getting that tiered service design right, getting the level of automation right, and tuning that appropriately will be the next big thing for us, I think.
Now, that also raises the topic of AI, and I'm curious as to how you're looking at AI as an aid in the overall mission for the university. And if I think about where AI can apply, there's the service experience, the student experience, but really across research, how faculty do their jobs. It's really the implications are enormous. How is the university and how are you thinking about AI, both from a service delivery standpoint and a security standpoint? There's so much to talk about there.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting one. I mean, I've been around IT for a while, but this is the fastest it's felt that something's been on me and on the team and the institution, perhaps in my career. We're at the stage really where we're looking at large language model. We're in pilot mode for some of those things, but I think through next year we will take some of those things to scale. But the kind of key component for us has been to make sure that we don't let the kind of technology side of things lead us, or go out there on its own. So we've had to recognise that digital skills are going to be just as important as the tooling, right? I think if I was to categorise it simply, we've got the two cohorts around AI in the institution. We've got those who are excited about it and those who are fearful about it. Broadly speaking, probably splits about down the middle. But even within the cohort that is excited about it, we've probably got a much smaller subset who are literate, right? So the kind of the way that we pace this, the way that we build the skills, and we're looking at using some of our own capabilities and those with external partners to build apprenticeship models and the use of AI tooling, and to align that with some of our pilots and our rollout, because we're going to have to build that skill set up within the institution. Within research, we've with some of the cloud platform work that we've done, we had a good foundation, and we've now created something called the Centre for Digital and Data Research, which sounds grand, but really is about making sure we have people with the right skills in data, cloud, AI to be able to support our researchers in the things that they do. We have very mixed cohorts. We have specialist AI researchers in the institution, and they ain't going to need an awful lot of support because they're developing the next wave of tooling and policy. But in other areas, there is a huge amount of support that's required for some of those things. And if research is going to keep pace within the institution with other organisations and with funding body expectations, then we're going to have to support that fairly extensively. And then, as we've touched on, I think the service automation is a big piece for us. I mean, universities are under relatively large financial pressures in the UK. I think being able to automate our service offerings for staff and for students, keeping people as the kind of key touch point for the critical things that students would expect is going to be really, really important for us. And then I think, look, I'm very keen philosophically to leverage platforms. So, there's no need for us to build everything. We can utilize workbenches and tools, because the innovation is coming down from these partners. So a handful of really key enterprise platforms that we can begin to leverage. We've just gone live with Oracle Fusion, and that really gives us some great opportunities, particularly in the finance space, to leverage AI that's coming down on Oracle's roadmap. So yeah, it's very broad, isn't it? There's a lot for us to do. We've got to consider people and tech.
I think the talent part is fascinating. So we have new people coming into our engineering organization who are almost AI native. If you've come out of school in the last, let's say your computer science major in the last couple of years, you probably used AI for most of your, college career. And then we've got people who've been engineers for 20 years who have to kind of learn all this all over, and it's hard. So we have the same kind of reskilling discussion and effort to train people, to get people to lean in and think differently about how they do their jobs. It's a challenging time. I think it's for any business and any organization is going through that, even those that are in, very technical fields. So it's fascinating. Last question for you. So tell me a little bit about what's exciting for you as you look forward over the next couple of years, in higher ed, and what are the things that you're concerned about? What are you spending your time on?
Yeah, I think it's trite, isn't it? I think the thing I'm most excited about is what we can do with AI. I mean, we're going to have to speed up. I think there are so many kind of key component parts that need to move together to make AI work for us. We're going to have to become much sharper on the way that we manage data and knowledge internally, I think, to be able to get the real leverage from it. But I'm very excited about what that can bring for the institution across pretty much every dimension: research, education, our services, everything. The thing that would keep me awake at night is legacy and cyber. And I've been down this journey in other organisations, but our board are becoming increasingly demanding about us dealing with our kind of legacy position, and we have a running cyber program, and it does genuinely keep me awake at night. Can we run fast enough when you've got, well, the bad guys are enabled by AI just in the same way that we can be, right? And, cycle times to exploit have reduced markedly, from months to hours, right? So, yeah, keeping our cyber team, we continue to invest there, but keeping them as close to that cutting edge from a defence perspective and mitigating our issues and keeping our kind of tooling and preventative measures up to date is my biggest concern, I think.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for taking the time. Chris Robinson, Chief Information Officer at Manchester Metropolitan University. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Enjoyed that conversation.